So today I'll be covering e-claim objects and why do we even need them in first place, and the details of these e-claim objects that we have, the work that we have done with NHA, and particularly these e-claim objects have gone into their RFP also. So we all know this. We all know this. How and why are we doing this e-object? Because as the number of population seeking health insurance increases with introduction of PMJ, also the health seeking behavior and the disease burden from NCD is increasing. The coverage of people having insurance is increased considerably, especially due to PMJ. It has increased to an extent that we cannot handle the claims in paper formats. We don't have time and money to put more and more resources who will actually manually read through all the forms and then arrive that this particular claim has to be passed or has to be denied. So this is just a journey how we have reached to 500 million people already covered. And if you listen, if we believe in Modi ji, definitely it will go up to 80% of the population that will be completely covered. Not exactly the way how BPL, below poverty line, are covered, but there will be some form either through taxation or through premium, some part of premium paid by the government. Some kind of model which already exists in other countries may come, and 80% of Indian population will be covered. Just to deal with this situation of having exponential amount of claim submissions, what we realized, which was also written in the book Niti Aayog, in the Niti Aayog book, that we need digital formats. Like how it happens in the US, it's EDI format that is being used. That is an electronic format in which the providers are asked to submit the claim, and it goes through a rule engine, it goes through a clearinghouse which has a rule inbuilt, and there is minimum manual intervention required there. So we to deal with PMJ, which is it's the UHC, we have to go to that stage of handling claims completely digitally. Only filtered claims, for example, if we put triggers in place, fraud triggers, only those filtered cases have to be looked into manually, which should account to only 10 to 20% of the total claim being submitted. So this is why we needed e-objects. Second most important, this particular slide, I think only Raghav is aware of this slide. This was a study we did at Strategy Council. So if you go around the world and if you see how a claim is handled, a healthcare claim is handled, there are various parts of it. In India, because of lack of data, handwritten, coded, so because of the different kind of data available, we actually couldn't do a lot of these processes in India digitally. We do it some or the other way. So this particular slide that you see, it actually shows you which are the processes that we still do in India, but which are the processes where we are lacking. For example, the one in blue are today as well are done on systems. It can be a digital system. The one which are in white, they're completely manual even today. But if we actually implement e-objects for India, slowly all things on systems. Red ones are completely absent right now, and hybrid is somewhere for half of the process on Excel, half of the process is converted. System is being used. For example, how TPA manages claims, they get the paper claims, download, then code it into digital format, and then they run it through a rule engine. So they do it partially, but again, not all TPAs are doing that. Some of the advanced TPAs like MediAssist, they do that. They also have a rule engine. They also have a AI engine that translates the handwritten data or the scanned copies into standard code directory elements. For example, a fever can be converted into ICD code for that fever in ICD-10 list. They have these engines, but again, it is only 80% accurate. And when it comes to health, it is very, very dangerous to have that kind of accuracy. We actually have to have 99% of accuracy if there is a yeah. So I'll just take one by one. What are the processes that are covered in India? Beneficiary management. So we all, some or the other way, we have a health insurance, right? So first foremost thing that is done is a beneficiary identification. When they actually put...
Sorry.
Yes, ma'am.
Priyanka, what are these purple ones?
Yes, ma'am.
What are these purple ones?
These are hybrids. These are hybrids. So half of the process might use some manual interventions or Excel format, and some are on the systems.
Okay. And these orange ones?
I forgot to add it. These are just integrations. So basically connecting two systems. For example, there is a beneficiary information management system and there is a claim management system. So I just integrate these two. So yeah.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first part, what happens is beneficiary management. Whenever a payer wants to put out a policy, the first thing they think about is who will be my target audience, who will be my target customer. For example, when Ayushman Bharat was launched, the target population was below poverty line, and that is why the census data was used in different states. Some states took their RSBY data, some states took the census data, and then they took an effort to correlate and see that all the RSBY beneficiaries are covered under the same data. That census data also had details like identification details like ration card number that actually proves that the person is below poverty line. So this is how they identified beneficiary. PMJ did on a large scale. Basically, all the identified beneficiary through this census data were sent either a Pradhan Mantri letter, a PM letter that had gone, which has a household number. Entered a household number that your household is covered. Please reach out to your nearest hospital or an Ayushman Bharat center where you can actually do your beneficiary verification done and get a golden card. The card that we say, that is a golden card. This is how Ayushman Bharat or public health schemes does. They identify the population they want to cover, and then they do the needful to include. So first part is the beneficiary management. Even in the private sector, they do have a target audience. When we go to these portals like Policy Bazaar, that is a way of collecting lead information that the kind of people I would want to extend my policy to. For example, disease management system like Vito, they have all the data of diabetes patients, right? So now they have also tied up with insurance providers like HDFC, because then they can actually give a target plan, only a diabetic plan or a policy to them, so that it is custom made for those people who have diabetes. Similarly, when the cancer rates have increased, there are cancer specific policy. So the type of policy defines the target audience. And once the beneficiary enrolls in private, you have to enroll yourself by paying premium, while in government you have to provide identification proof for the criteria that they have set in to get enrolled in the beneficiary information system. PMJ also has a completely digital BIS system. That basically what it does is, it actually takes the census database, which is a reference database for that state, and whenever the beneficiary comes up with the letter, the PM letter, or saying that, okay, I have checked my eligibility in the date. They have also given a patient app. I have checked my eligibility. My name is available. Please enroll me. Then he comes down. His Aadhaar number is taken, or if he doesn't have an Aadhaar, there are other 2-3 documents that they have listed. They take and they verify and confirm the beneficiary. Now onwards, he'll be able to avail the services whenever he visits any of the hospitals. So most of the insurance providers have a beneficiary management system. We can also call it a beneficiary database. So the beneficiary database will have all the information from demographics to which policy, what is the coverage the particular beneficiary has, all the exclusions, inclusion, everything, every detail of that particular beneficiary. Second is policy management. Policy management is still not completely on systems. they do manage different policies depending upon the payer type. So we still don't have clear answers on that. For example, government normally has plain policy for everyone, the same rules. But when it comes to private players, it gets very complicated. Depending upon premium, the age, gender, or comorbidities, your policy rules, regulations, conditions vary. So then they maintain it through a system, and every policy has a unique ID which gets tagged to a beneficiary ID. This is how you actually manage policies. Because even if you go to Policy Bazaar, you will see the same health insurance provider or payer will have same policy with different name. Sometimes you will call it gold, then they'll call it diamond, but there are some variations. And when you actually get the beneficiary on board, you do a check on what are the beneficiaries' existing conditions. On the basis, further your policy is filtered and your premium is decided. So the older you get, the premium goes high. The more existing conditions you have, the premium goes high. Because what they do is, whenever they decide a policy, it's a risk planning. So they assume, okay, if I give this policy to a person of this age group, how often will he use my policy? So it's a risk management business. So you get pool of money from people, but out of that only 10% money will be gone. So this is how an insurance planning is done. Similarly, provider management is nothing but basically managing your network of hospitals. Normally, some of the payers do have a provider management system. If you know, every time a provider or a hospital wants to empanel under a policy, they have to submit a detailed form, which will have details like how many bed do I support, what are the specialties, what are the equipments, and all those details, that they basically do a due diligence on the hospital and enroll him, so that tomorrow your patient will be listed. Okay, if you go to these network hospitals, it will be a cashless service, but if you go to a non-network hospital, then the patient himself has to take care of the reimbursement part of it. And provider management, right now it's almost the provider management system and the claim system, if they have in place, they don't talk to each other. So it's just a database that is there. And whenever they think there is a problem, they just look it for reference. So they don't talk to each other. Otherwise, if you actually connect these two systems and we have common data available, when we talk about provider management, we can, if you remember, we keep talking about provider registry. These provider, if there is a single provider registry which will act as source of truth, and there will be databases that can get connected to it, which will have more details like number of beds, specialty, and every time, like how we update our address and details in Aadhaar registry. Similarly, hospitals are given a way to update it there and submit a proof. And the due diligence committee of every state does the checking. So we don't even need multiple provider management system. We will just need IDs of these people to ensure that whatever the claim they are submitting, they do have a specialty to cater to that claim. And it's not a fraud attempt. They are not raising a claim for the specialty or condition or the surgery they are not able to provide, but they are still raising a claim. So this is how linkages is very important. Claim management, right now it's more or less manual, or when you ask the payers and you say, how are you handling claim, they will tell you we are using a system. But what they are actually doing is they are just digitizing and not digitalizing. They are just scanning and uploading the documents, and then a doctor's team on the other side, and then admin team which does a basic check. Then the doctor's team or the clinical team goes through each line written in the claim, as well as the discharge summary that comes along, and only then they pass or fail a claim. So it's still more manual in place. Fraud management, completely manual, because we don't have digital data available. Fund management, to some extent, that too mostly it's the government agencies that try to do. If you NHA was actually made for that, so that it can control where the health fund is going, who is taking it, and they have the entire loop, which is a closed loop. Because if you see today, 85% of health fund goes from the center, but still state don't listen to center. They don't listen to center because state health is still a state subject. So the entire fund management part is missing again here. But in Ayushman Bharat, the best part is the states who have already implemented Ayushman Bharat, what they have done is, for example, they already have a state insurance running. How Ayushman Bharat has integrated with them is, okay, whatever claim is, I'll pay 60% of it. Rest 40% should go from your state health fund. This is how they are managing. So here Ayushman Bharat becomes the primary insurance provider or primary payer, and the state health or the state becomes a secondary payer here. Yeah, compliance and reporting. Even today, IRDA has prescribed a format which needs to be submitted monthly, has to be submitted to the insurance bureau. Basically, a dump of all the data, all the claims that had come to them. So this part is being done by IRDA. Public health schemes, nothing is done as of today. It's only private health insurance doing something in places. Yeah. Any questions on any of the processes here? No questions, so I'll move forward. So now you all are aware about this. I have spoken about it multiple times. So to solve the problem of lack of data, a machine readable data, so that instead of number of resources, we can actually put a rule engine in place and smoothen the workflow of claim management. We came up with the idea of e-objects. These e-objects are nothing but, in very, very simple terms, a packet of information. Packet of information that carry minimum information a machine requires to pass or fail a claim. So the entire idea is again on the minimum viable product definition. I will only give you that detail that you need to pass or fail a claim. And if there is a trigger, if that claim initiates a fraud trigger that you have put, basically rules, then only you will look into more details, and those more details will be available in form of discharge summaries and counter notes, which for a while will remain scanned copies. But if we start from at least e-claims, there will be one day, maybe 1 year, 2 year down the line, these encounter note discharge summary will also come in electronic format, again the e-object format. We internally have done the homework. We have developed these e-provider objects also, but to take it to implementation, it will take some time because we don't have a champion. We don't have any incentive to give to the providers to adopt it. So there's some of the objects that we have defined for handling claim, especially for the HCP. So NHA, because they deal with Ayushman Bharat and which is covering maximum of our population, they realize the same need. At the same time, when we were talking about paper claims, why paper claims won't work for a long time, why we need an e-object, at the same time, NHA was also thinking about the same thing. It was basically driven by Kiran from the iSpirit team. So then they submitted the report that manual interventions are no longer needed. We cannot survive if we go the manual way. Then it was decided that there will be a common claim platform that NHA will put in place, which will use these e-objects, which are electronic packets of information, which are machine readable, to basically facilitate interoperability or information exchange between payer and provider. To facilitate this HCP or health claim platform that NHA is trying to build, the RFP is already out. These e-objects were detailed out. The concept was written in Niti Aayog, but it was just an overview. The detailing was done in Access Health. And the objects that are considered and that are detailed out with processes for NHA includes, right now it includes IPD claims, which is coverage eligibility request and response, pre-authorization object and response, claim request response. Similarly, provider payments after the claim settlement, I have paid you this much without any explanation why I didn't pay you 20% of it. This everything will become digital because everything can be tracked then. Right now we don't have OPD claims. I think only Religare provides some type of OPD claim. But going forward, there will be OPD claims in which the single source of truth, the document that will act as single source of truth will be those e-encounter or e-prescription. Basically, to pay a claim, I would want to know why the patient has come to the doctor in the first place. So all those details we get from e-prescription, e-encounter and e-referral. So the health claim platform you guys are already aware about. These e-objects, this particular health claim platform basically acts as a router. These e-objects are like I said, packet of information or an envelope of information. The envelope has an address, who is sending it and who should receive it. The same, that is the only information that is available for the claim platform or the router. So in simple terms, this particular, he'll act as a postman. It will act as a postman, will read the address and then do a very basic validation in terms of technical errors or the information it requires to route the claim. It will perform basic validation and transmit it to the particular payer who as per the address provided. The information, the detailed information about patient, beneficiary, treatment given, everything is part of the claim object, which will not be revealed to the health claim platform. It will only be accessed by a particular payer to which it is intended. And the entire concept of implementation was written in the IRDA and NHA Joint Working Group report. So the different type of provider objects, basically, where will these e-objects come from? Even though HCP wants to receive claims in e-object format, where will they come from? They are anyways going to come from the provider side, the hospital side. And the kind of object they might have to generate are e-discharge object, because that is a legal object, that is a legal document even today, according to IRDA, to pass or fail the claim. Because if you just pick up any of discharge summary you have ever seen, it will have all the details about the entire period the patient was hospitalized. It will tell you all the procedures that were done, the medication that were given, even minor details. So it is like a holy grail which have all the information a payer need to validate a claim. But going through this discharge summary is very tedious. Hence, what we did was we defined this e-claim object, which will have minimum required details from this e-discharge summary on what was the treatment given, what was the diagnosis that was treated, what was the package used if there was a package used, what are the services provided. All these details are extracted from it, and that is given to the payer, which is sufficient for the payer to pass or fail a claim. Right now, because this information was not available, they had to go through the entire discharge summary to come up with the claim denial. Similarly, IRDA had long back published a standard format of generating an e-bill, which they have gone to a level of telling you this is the service category. Under the service category, this is a sub-service category and the item code. They've gone to that level, but nobody had implemented it. It's very easy for HIS providers to implement what IRDA has provided. It's very flexible. It's in the similar way. Today also HIS providers are doing it. It's just they use their own subcategory category codes. They can just replace it. It's very much doable. So if we have these two things in place, automatically a e-claim object can be generated. Yeah, this is a workflow that HCP NHA has put in place. Any questions now? Hello?
Hello, ma'am. Can you hear me?
Yes, Raghav.
Ma'am, in Ayushman Bharat, they also require the images of the bedside, like the images for the surgery where the patient has undergone. So how will we make sure that that is provided?
So they do need images because right now the systems are broken. There is no way they can track the patient was really admitted or not. There is no way they can track the bed number on which the patient was admitted. There is no way they can actually send a medical audit team. Hence, they are asking for pictures bedside pictures and all. But if you actually look at Kerala, because of the high amount of Muslim population, they have denied that completely. So now what they have done is, with the whenever the HCP goes live, patient auth has become a mandatory requirement. Why patient auth? Because any government scheme is allowed to store, basically allowed to use Aadhaar card for authentication of patient. So when the BIS first time patient comes in, that time he might not have Aadhaar card number, but it is mandated. The second time a patient needs a treatment, he has to get his Aadhaar card validated. Once you have Aadhaar card, what they do is they take patient. So Aadhaar card has our iris image. It also has our fingerprints, right? So Aadhaar registry sends a token for verification, which will have these details. On the provider side, there will be a fingerprinter where they'll take patient authorization. And if these two match, we'll ensure the same patient has come for admission. So that is done at the time of admission. That is also done at the time of discharge. It is also done before raising a pre-auth or claim. So a pre-auth cannot go through until you take patient auth to ensure that, okay, the patient was admitted. You know this, because when Ayushman Bharat was launched, it was launched in because it was already declared they had to launch in 6 months. So that time, there was very, very less time to thought through this. But now they have found the answer, because many of the people don't like to be captured while they're on the bed, especially women. Hence, the patient auth will help it now.
So in patient auth, they will capture the Aadhaar details every time in every step.
So whenever there is a BIS verification done, the first time patient comes in, they take Aadhaar number. Using that Aadhaar number, Aadhaar registry sends a token. That token has detail of patient fingerprints and iris, whatever information that was captured during Aadhaar registration. On the provider side, there are these machines to get a fingerprinting done. So what it happens in the back end is, patient's current fingerprint and the fingerprint that Aadhaar provides are matched with each other. This is how you say, okay, this is the same person who is also part of BIS and also identified as the same person in Aadhaar, has come down for a admission. So you ensure the same patient gets admitted, and the trigger that patient is here physically. How you are ensuring he is here physically is because of the fingerprint. Raghav, is it clear now?
Yes, ma'am, it is clear. But ma'am, just one more question. Like, how will we know that he has undergone the treatment?
So at the time of admission, when they raise the pre-authorization, they take a fingerprint. See, if you ask me, providers can get smarter, right? They'll just take the fingerprint and send the patient away, right? This might happen, but there are certain things we can't actually make sure. Even if you want to use the patient photograph or photograph of the procedure that was done on patient, how do you even know patient was just made to sit on the bed and then he had left? There are certain things which will still happen. We cannot solve everything with technology.
I'm like, abhi to, they also ask for the reports, their X-ray images or any other report. So in this claim form, we will be sending that.
So how it will happen is, whenever I'll take you to the what happens is, when a patient ends up on a hospitalization on the reception stay, he needs an admission. What they do is they send him to a OPD. So it's always OP to IP, unless until it's an emergency case, it's OP to IP transfer. So the OP patient will have to, every Ayushman package has prerequisite investigations that are required to be available to be able to raise a pre-auth for that patient. So the OP doctor writes down those tests and get it done, which are already covered in part of package. So they don't even charge for that. Once the report are ready, they send a pre-authorization request. Obviously, they would have admitted the patient once it got confirmed, but then they send a pre-authorization request, and these reports will go as attachments. In the beginning, because we don't have digital data enabled, they'll still, with the e-pre-authorization object, it will go as an attachment. But slowly, these will basically be taken care using an e-encounter object, because e-encounter object that was created will have result details also. Automatically the result gets updated. If you have digital system, your lab is integrated, you automatically your results get updated. I may not even have to look at the reports in detail. I'll only look at the reports when I see there is something fishy, against which good clinical protocol guidelines can be put in, and the same rules can be coded in the rule engine that handles claims, which will trigger it anyways.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Any other question? Sonali, Akriti, Aditi, anyone? Okay. So, because it's similar, what and yeah. Okay. So what NHA is trying to do right now with the health claim platform is exactly what it iSpirit had done or government has done when the BHIM app was launched. So they create a UPI platform for those transactions, and then they released a BHIM app. That time Paytm and all were not available. They are trying to do the same thing. They have identified, like we have designed the specification for these e-objects. They'll publish it in the market, but because we don't have them ready, we don't have application as of now who can generate it, they are trying to give 3 options to both payer and provider to be able to generate these e-object and to be able to receive these e-objects and work on it. You actually need 2 different applications, right? So because the market is not mature enough and they are not aware about these changes and they are not yet published the APIs in public, it will take some time for them to actually build the off-shelf products for this, like how it happens in US. So what they are saying, we will give a free TMS provider to all the providers, and we'll also give a free TMS payer to all the payers who want to use the platform. They will also release the specification or design specification in open, so that there can be vendors who will start developing these products, off the shelf products, and also the hospitals who have an existing HIS in place or a payer who has an existing payer management system in place can use their product vendor and ask them to modify as per the e-object requirement. So basically, they will tweak their system to generate these e-object as output that can pass through the health claim platform. So there are 3 options. Either you use the free software provided by NHA, you tell your existing vendor to customize as per the specification provided. Third, when the market will evolve, there will be similar applications like Paytm, Google Pay will come around, who will be readily able to just put on a legacy system and will be able to generate these e-objects. This is just a sample how the exchange will happen between provider and payer. So provider will basically generate an eligibility check object, which is nothing but just to check. It can be as basic as an active, the beneficiary whose information is being submitted as an active policy or not. For example, sometimes it happens the patient or the beneficiary has not paid the premium for 3 months. So automatically her policy gets deactivated. So if that kind of patient comes and visits the hospital with their card or with their insurance information, they really want to check before admitting the patient. They would want to know if the patient is covered or not. They'll just get that information as yes or no. To a detailed information, for example, the eligibility check can also give you detailed information, item level details, for example, all the exclusions, inclusions, all the coverage details, what is pre-hospitalization number of days, post-hospitalization number of days, any cash benefit, all those details. But again, it is up to the payer to decide how much information they would want to give to provider. Because when we were talking to MediAssist, they suggested very well that private insurance would not like that, because if you provide all the coverage detail, the provider would try to manipulate and exploit it just to get a claim cleared or a fraud claim to be created. After the eligibility check is done, there will be a pre-authorization request which will take place, which will say, okay, patient has come up with this complaint. This is the diagnosis on the basis of so and so results, and this is what we are suggesting. And the estimated amount of this treatment would be, for say example, 10,000. They always give an upper limit. It is received by the payer. Again, the claim switch or the HCP will route it to the right payer depending upon the identifier that were provided, and then payer would say approve or disapprove looking at the details of patient. And again, a response object will be created from the payer side, which will tell the provider whether the pre-auth was accepted or rejected. Or if there is any information missing, they can attach. For example, if there was a case where they really wanted to see the patient report result, and they had not updated it, the payer will send a query saying more information, and they'll also provide what kind of information they need. Then in the same pre-authorization object, the provider will be allowed to attach the report. Today it will be only scanned copies because of the immature market, but tomorrow it will be just digital copy or just a link to the lab report ID that can be accessed by the payer. Because now in what happens in health insurances, there is a implied consent between health payer and the beneficiary that they can access a patient's data for any claim related information, and they don't need a consent there. So similarly, after pre-authorization request, there will be a claim request, which is final submission when they want to discharge the patient. Normally, hospitals are not allowed to bound the patient. They have to discharge the patient as soon as patient recovers. And there is a discharge intimation which is sent to the payer and the billing department of the hospital to say start preparing the discharge documents, basically the e-bill that we were talking about. Once e-bill and everything is ready, a claim request will be submitted to the provider, to the payer, and meanwhile the patient might have been physically discharged. Now payer will use his machine engine, rule engine, or maybe manually download the claim and go through it, pass or fail the claim, and will send a response object, a claim response object, which will have details from yes or no, rejected, approval, total amount approved, to item level details. Okay, I'm paying for this item. I'm paying for and I'm not paying for these few items. Even when, for example, in terms of bed charges, normally what happens is when a patient arrives at a hospital, he is informed, because there is always a TPA desk there. He is informed you are eligible for a general ward, but if you want to have a double sharing or twin sharing room, the balance you have to pay. So there will be a co-payment automatically taken care, because they already have configuration with respect to the insurance provider the patient has. So when they do a patient registration, or whenever there's a new patient registration, they take demographic of the patient. A hospital takes demographics of the patient. They also take patient type. Patient category is nothing but, is it a cash patient? That means he is going to pay from his own pocket, or is it a insurance or credit patient? A credit patient can be an insurance patient, can also be a corporate patient, where a corporate pays for the patient treatment. When it's an insurance patient, the third check is who is the provider, who is the insurance provider, basically who is the payer. On the basis of payer, the empaneled hospital and then payer already have decided rates, which is configured in the HIS. Automatically that picks up. So if a patient who is eligible for a general bed wants to actually get a twin sharing bed, automatically the HIS starts calculating the co-payment amount there. That, okay, out of your total charges, this much, the general ward charges will be deducted from the payer's bill, but rest you have to pay. So there will be two bills generated at the same time, patient payable and insurance payable bill. Yeah. Any doubt with respect to the flow?
No, ma'am. Ma'am, just one curiosity. This beneficiary data, will it be updated yearly after this, or like we are using for 2011, will it continue to be that?
So in government, yes, we have that issue. It depends upon the proactiveness of the state, how often they want to update, but because they were taking census data, which happens once in 5 years, we can't do much. But people, some states which are proactive like Andhra or Kerala, they do check.
And they are
It is
regularly updated.
regularly updating. While what happens in the private sector is every time a new beneficiary gets enrolled, it automatically gets updated, right? So I'll always know, because there you pay and you buy. It's like you are paying for a service, you get updated in the BIS. If you start paying for an upgraded policy, again the status will be updated for an upgraded policy. So normally private sector insurance BIS is always updated, while because public health normally focuses on a particular segment of society or a particular segment of population, there the BIS updation is lacking. Yeah. So after the claim is passed or failed and the response is sent to the provider, there are something called a payment notice. A payment file gets created, which is created by the payer with respect to batch. For example, obviously, once we have payment blocking and bank integration in this platform, it can be per claim basis. But until we have that, what payers even today do is they say for today, for this particular provider, what are the past claims, basically all the approved claims, and total is created and the payment file goes to the payer's bank, which then makes the transaction and send a transaction ID to be able to track, to be able to give it to the provider. Okay, we made a transaction. This is the transaction ID. This is the amount. They do it manually over email, over phone. This is how they do it today. But once we have these e-objects in place and the HCP in place, everything will be updated. So the claim response will have a payment notice object attached to it saying, since it is approved, your payment will be made in this form. For example, it will be a DD, it will be a check, or it will be a online transfer. The mode of payment they provide. Once the payment is made, then a payment reconciliation automatically is formed, saying, okay, this payment was, because even the batch, all the pending claims that were there will have a claim ID. So every claim ID will after the payment of the batch, every claim ID will get allocated with how much amount was paid against that claim ID. Automatically, it gets divided. That's the capability financial systems normally have. So the payer system will actually automatically generate the payment reconciliation object, which will be shared with provider, which will be again sent from payer side to provider, and so that the provider can again do a reconciliation in their HIS system. That these many claims are approved from this payer, these many claims are pending, these many claims are queried because I don't agree to the payment that was made to me. And then they can again initiate, maybe go through a grievance mechanism. These are the things that we still have to think about, how we'll handle these scenarios. Yeah, this is just an example of all the processes that I explained you, which happen in real. Once HCP comes into picture and these e-objects get implemented, these are the processes that will take place. So these are the processes on the left hand side, which will happen on the provider side. And wherever you see a purple triangle, those are the objects generated by the provider side, while the triangle or the pyramid that you see in red, those are generated by the payer. So what will happen? So I've already explained you. I'll just go one by one, something which I haven't covered. There will be a coverage eligibility check object. Again, an optional object. It is not a mandatory object. You want to use it as a provider, you can use it to get an active status of a beneficiary that has come to you for treatment. Against the coverage eligibility check, there will be a coverage eligibility response. Basically a response. It's like a query is sent, you send an answer against it. Then a pre-authorization request is sent, a pre-authorization response is raised. Again, query and answer. Pre-authorization enhancement, for example, a patient had come for hernia, a surgery of hernia. But when you opened up the patient, you also know that the appendix has to be removed. So in such cases, you have to send an enhancement request with another package detail, to which a payer can approve or decline. Normally what happens in surgery cases, even if you work in a hospital, and you have worked for an OT department or billing department, you will know that if the same table is used for 3 surgeries, the amount gets divided. Even in HIS module, billing module, it will be very, very clear that first surgery you have to pay 100%, second surgery you will have to pay 60% of the total cost. If there is a third surgery on the same table, you just have to pay 30% of it, because you are utilizing the same equipment that time. Hence, the charges get reduced. Similar way, PMJ also provides payment for multiple surgeries on the same table. And this is why pre-authorization enhancement is required. Pre-authorization enhancement is also required in cases where you thought the patient will be discharged in 5 days, and you had raised a pre-authorization request only for 5 days. But on the 5th day, you realize the patient needs more observation. The patient hasn't recovered, and you request the payer for 3 more days. That is again a type of authorization enhancement. After authorization, patient admitted, there was an automatic IPD number that gets generated by HIS. So that will ensure this is the IPD number, this was the admission date, this was the admission time, because on that basis you actually start charging patient for hospitalization. All those details. Also, this claim request, because we are saying again and again, the payer will not touch the discharge summary unless there is a fraud trigger in place. This claim request will not only have the service details, it will also have diagnosis, minimum diagnosis details. What are the diagnoses? What were the pre-existing conditions or comorbidities patient has, due to which claim cost may rise, and also all the investigations that were ordered and drugs that were ordered for patient, all these details. And if there were any complication, there are MDDS also has complication IDs, so you can enter that complication, on the basis of which the claim gets submitted. When the payer receives these claim, automatically the rule engine will run through each line item, and they can pass or fail a claim. If there is a problem with respect to rule, for example, a patient had appendix of a patient was removed 1 month back, and again with the same patient, same claim is raised. Obviously, there will be a trigger in the system saying a procedure like appendix, which is one-time event in a lifetime, should not be repeated. So automatically there will be a fraud trigger. These are rules which can be easily defined, and the more refined clinical protocol can be, which we lack in India right now. But if we can start writing at least the basic clinical protocols, a lot of things can be sorted at this level only. All the rules can be translated from a clinical protocol to a rule engine. Then a claim response is sent. After the claim response is sent, I've already told you a payment file gets created, which will have all the batch details, which basically all the pending claim to be paid, approved claim to be paid for a particular provider. I create a batch of payment. I send the payment file to the bank, who will then make the payment and send me an update with the transaction ID. That transaction ID, as soon as I update and say payment made, because all claim responses had those calculations, how much amount to be made, to be paid against each claim ID, automatically the reconciliation object gets generated. It's the system capability. And the same is sent to the provider. What a health claim platform additionally will provide us? Payer provider digital contract. So health claim platform says, if you want to use my platform, to provider and payer both, if you want to use my platform for a provider, your payer should also be on HCP. And similarly, if a payer wants to use the platform, his network provider or his network hospital should also be on HCP. So the digital contract management that you can see the first block, it's nothing but the relationship management. It's basically saying, okay, these two people, this hospital ID and this payer ID has a existing active digital format, because when I send a claim or any of the object, it will have the address detail, which will only have IDs. It will have patient UHID, it will have beneficiary ID, it will have a provider who is sending provider ID or hospital ID. It will also have the treating doctor ID and payer ID. So if I submit this claim to my HCP, If the hospital ID and the payer ID doesn't match as per the digital contract that exists, it will just return back the object saying invalid object, payer provider doesn't match, doesn't have a active digital contract. So that basic validation that it actually reaches the right payer, that is being done using this e-facility info. Like I already explained you today, for empanelment, providers have to submit n number of forms and very, very long forms. The payer again has to take a burden of maintaining all these forms and files. They are manual, completely manual paper forms. To get away with this, and also we don't have a facility registry in place. IRDA do have Rohini, but again, Rohini gives you very, very minimum data. It just gives you a Rohini ID, name of the hospital, location of the hospital. Basically, the information that might not be useful for me as a payer to say the empaneled hospital, the hospital I want to empanel has all the facilities that I'm looking for. So to solve this problem of having multiple files flying around, NHA has also proposed there will be an e-facility info object, basically a standardized form that will be used to get hospital details. It will have hospital details like hospital name, who's the owner, type of hospital, specialties, number of beds, procedures, all these details, and even the doctors list. Who are the doctors, all their registration IDs. All these details will be collected and it will be stored in a database in this HCP. This database will be accessed only when there is a problem, because whenever a claim is raised, even especially in PMJ, the accountability lies on the treating doctor. A pre-authorization when needs to be submitted, there is a patient auth taken, there is also a doctor's auth taken there, the treating doctor's auth. Only then you submit, because there should be accountability. Okay, the claim was submitted, I had checked the diagnosis detail, because if tomorrow the diagnosis details are found false, then accountability will lie on hospital as well as the doctor. Hence, this e-facility info is required. Sometimes what happens is, some of the hospital, like when we studied Indonesia, this is what we found, that when the payments were made for claims, government actually didn't have money to pay the claims, because what happened was every GP and primary care providers were directly referring patients. They were referring every single patient to the hospital. Hence, the claim was high. Patient could have been treated at primary care. They did not put a checkpoint on why the patient required hospitalization, why the patient went to hospital. So there should be a check. You are only allowed to refer a patient when you don't have that specialty. Where will I get that detail? How many specialty I have? I'll get the detail from this provider info, e-facility info database that NHA will maintain. So you will know the referral was valid or the referral was purposely because there were tie-up between two hospitals or one clinic and one hospital. Because even today we get those, doctors do get some concessions on referrals. Just to solve that problem, that part they are taking care of. And once a hospital submits their form here and the database gets created for that hospital, and there will be a unique ID created for that hospital, this same hospital wants to empanel with other payers on the platform. For them, he just have to provide his hospital ID. He doesn't have to do anything else now. So it's sorted for life. And every time, like a Aadhaar registry, they have to update. They downgrade a specialty. They upgrade the hospital. They will have to submit a proper verification details, and only then the e-facility info database gets updated with a proper due diligence. The last part that NHA would provide, which is more technical in nature, is policy package configuration. So basically what happens today is, every time a payer signs up with a provider or vice versa, payer normally gives a rate card to them. Okay, these are the services. So a provider, these are the services, and these are the amount I'm going to pay you for these services. Normally there is an agreement of 10% discount on what their current pricing is, because I'm going to give you patients. All those discussions are there. For HIS to configure, they either do a percentage-wise discounting or they create a separate rate card for that specific payer. And this has to be done every time you tie up with a new payer or new policy. What HCP is saying, that there can be a mechanism, they have a mechanism where whenever the first time a new beneficiary of a new pair comes in, there will be a query sent from provider side for all the configuration details, basic the rate details. Once the query is sent through HCP to payer will send all the packages or service list with rates. How it is possible? Because right now every hospital has services in their own format. But even if we just use IRDA format or LOINC for investigations, SNOMED for procedures, the procedure name, codes, everything remains same. Only the pricing change, which is just a schema, just value of something is changing. The schema still remains the same. For public providers or public payers, it will be very, very easy to do because they only have packages. But it will be very, very complicated for private providers because they go to item level details, even to consumables, exclusions, inclusions. Hence, it might be very complicated for the private side to do it or provide the information. But once the payer provides that information in a digital format, the cache memory of the provider system or the HIS will store the data so that again and again they don't have to do the discounting, they don't have to reconfigure or look what are the packages this particular payer is providing. Every time I'm raising a pre-auth, I just have to select a package. I don't have to request payer, okay, do you provide the service or not? So it will be automated for the lifetime. Yeah. Any questions here? Hello, any questions here?
No, ma'am.
No, ma'am. Okay. So these are just example of the transactions that are going to happen from provider to HCP to payer, which I have already explained you. Coverage eligibility request, against which there will be eligibility response. Get public key, like I told you, the header part, which have all the identifiers or the address part of the object, will be readable by HCP. Rest entire data will be encrypted. Only the payer will have a private key to be able to open and see the data. This is just the sample. So why do we need e-object? Is it just the digital format of the IRDA form? No. The IRDA form that you can see in front of on the screen, if you see, they have tried to standardize the elements, but they were not able to standardize the values that goes inside that form. It is still textual. Everything is textual. So I am writing, he's writing 31031995. He can also write 03311995. My system will not recognize it, right? So just to solve that problem, how the input value should be. So first, the most important thing that eObjects take care is it takes away textual data entry. 90% of the textual data entry, because MDDS has code directories. Code directory is nothing but the drop downs that we see, the values that we see whenever we fill an online form. Those are code directories or the value sets that it uses. So every time these details to be filled, for example, diagnosis, package, all these will be just dropped down. There will be standard code set for it. So I don't have to actually write it down. Even diagnosis, if we use ICD-10, everyone, a fever will be called a fever only. But if we ask different providers to write it, they'll use their own jargons there. So this is why this e-objects were defined, because they have standard value set, standard elements to, for example, name. The maximum size allowed for name, first name, is 14 characters. But another system might take a name more than 14 characters. When these two systems wants to exchange data, it won't accept. There will be an error because the other system doesn't have capability to store a name more than 14. So it has gone to a level saying each field, this is the format, this is the size, maximum size it should capture. So if all the systems generate e-objects in the same format, everything will be interoperable. You actually will not even need translation there in between them. You don't have to do data element level mappings. Yeah. And hence it will be machine readable, completely machine readable. So like I've already explained you what the address will be like. Address is nothing but the header. So all the e-objects will have two parts, specifically two parts. Header, which is the address, which will have all the identifiers. It will only have identifiers. If you see in this form, patient details are written, handwritten. But if we have standard BIS, Beneficiary Information Management System, because all payers maintain their beneficiary details in digital format. I as a system, I as a provider just have to provide the beneficiary ID. And once it travels to the payer, they will be able to recognize it and they don't need to get data, age, gender data written. They can extract it from their BIS automatically then because two systems are connected. The e-object is machine readable and the BIS is connected, which is part of the claim management system. These are integrated systems. So automatically I won't need demographic details. It can just sit in the BIS. I just have to send a beneficiary ID for unique identification of payer. Beneficiary. It will have header, it will have segments. Segments are nothing but logical grouping of data elements. For example, clinical details. So under the clinical details segment, I'll only provide clinical details like diagnosis. Diagnosis क्या था? Provision. Diagnosis क्या था उसका? Provisional था. Diagnosis का type क्या था? Investigations क्या order किए थे? All this detail. Patient की history क्या थी? क्या comorbidities है उसको? वो सब उस segment में आएगा. Similarly, when there will be a segment called insurance detail, it might have details like, because at least I need policy ID, bare minimum to identify the right beneficiary. I need beneficiary ID and I also need policy ID. So once I have these two, I'll be able to track down automatically. Rules can be configured on the basis of the policy that patient has. And these segments have data elements which are nothing but EHR and MDDS based metadata. All the elements are MDDS elements which will have defined size and format. EHR standards have already defined that a diagnosis element should capture diagnosis code using ICD 1011. Procedure should be captured using SNOMED. So these standard code directories, which are international code directories, these are defined in EHR. So these objects are defined or designed on the basis of these two important things. This is just an example of what an e-claim object would look like. It will have header, basically information about the payer, facility, beneficiary, only IDs. It will not have any textual data. It will be only IDs. Clinical summary, claim relevant episode details. For example, admission date, discharge date, admission time, discharge time, presenting complaint when the patient had reported for admission, what was the diagnosis, any further diagnosis during the treatment that might have complicated the case, any existing condition like diabetes that can again complicate the case, any complication during the surgeries, all those details will come under clinical summary. And also all the clinical orders that were made for patient during his stay in the hospital. Bill summary, on the basis of these order details, automatically HIS can create bill summary. Again, bill summary details, categories are defined already by IRDS. Say example, there are bill buckets called bed charges. Bed charges, it will have total amount of the type of bed that was used during the duration of admission, during the duration of treatment in the hospital, and their charges, and for number of days it gets multiplied, and total bed charges is the bill bucket you will see there. Similarly, there will be investigation charges, there will be consumable charges. So all these bill segments or bill buckets are already defined by IRDA. We are using the same thing here. Pre-auth details, because this is a claim object which will already have an existing pre-auth that was approved, तभी तो ये claim आज generate हुआ है. अगर pre-auth deny हो जाता तो claim होता ही नहीं, patient को admit ही नहीं करते, या patient को खुद payable करना पड़ता if it was rejected. So because there is an associated pre-auth, we do need उसका reference, because one single claim ID will have all these objects in place linked to it, so that we know हर transaction level पे क्या क्या हुआ था इस claim के, when the pre-auth was raised, pre-auth का result क्या था, क्या active pre-auth है या फिर declined pre-auth है, still a claim raise किया गया. All those details I need to be linked. So all those details are provided in the final claim object. And disclaimer and digital signature of doctor, patient, and whoever is submitting it. So this is how a e-claim object, the claim request, not pre-authorization, the claim request will look like. So I was telling you that हमें सिर्फ IDs चाहिए. We just need IDs in place. Beneficiary ID. Why? Because all these details that you see in front of your screen, beneficiaries, UHID, if tomorrow we have a UHID or maybe say Aadhaar number, which can act as a UID for the patient. All these details are normally captured in the payer's beneficiary information system, but again in a different format. So we have gone one step ahead and told them, okay, I know every one of you might have different BIS designed differently, capturing different data. Let's do one thing. This is the way your beneficiary. Just use these data elements and their size and format details and build it so that your beneficiary information systems are interoperable and are able to facilitate the information a payer or provider would want to get from your your BIS. Similarly, there will be a payer registry that will be maintained by HCP. For example, NHA told us that all these states actually act as payers. So for them, every state they have to register the payer, or basically they have to capture every state as a payer with a unique ID so that they become the payers. Similarly, if there are private insurance providers, all these information about the payer will have to be submitted and the database will be maintained by HCP. Because there will be transfers, there will be bank account transfers. Similarly, for provider registry, the facility info database, again, unique ID ke saath with unique ID of the hospital, I will also have bank details of the hospital. So that today, how they do it, when they submit the claim, they also fill in their bank details. But here, only registered bank will get the payments. So again, you are actually trying to track down money, and there won't be any under the table or black money or cash money exchange that can happen. It can still happen. We can't record it, but at least on paper, the claim is very clear. The response said, I will have to pay you 1,200, and the payment that was made was also of 1,200 only. There is no disparity between amount agreed and amount paid. Right now, that is completely broken. So that problem it will solve. This is just an example. I have just opened one of the segment from the claim object. So claim object will have, especially for Ayushman Bharat and public health scheme, they have packages. So for example, primary package code. For example, primary package is something that was initiated during the first pre-authorization, for which actually the patient has required admission. The diagnosis, the package that was linked to the diagnosis, that was a presenting complaint then. Primary package amount. So there will be package codes, package amount, bed days. I have already given you example of bed days. It's the total amount of the type of bed I have used during my stay in the hospital. Because there are patients who may ask for upgrade. There are patients because of financial issues who may ask for a downgrade. So hence we have to take into account, the billing system of the hospital takes into account type of bed and the cost attached to it, and number of days the patient was on that particular bed. This is how they calculate, and total amount will be always shown. But if somebody needs to see the detail can also be seen. It's all configurability. ICU days, how many times I was in ICU, because ICU days are again calculated on the basis of ICU bed. So ICU bed has a rate, a fixed rate to it, depending upon the type of ICU, and that get calculated here. It will have number of days and again cost. Lab charges, LOINC. LOINC is a free standard, international standard available. Anyone can use LOINC dictionary. LOINC has all the radiology and lab investigation listed with unique codes. So if we just use that, so imagine it will be so easy for NHA to define a schema that the required configuration, what is the investigation cost for this pair, I can just have to change the values. All my labs investigation looks the same. My type of bed looks the same. My procedure looks the same. If I use the same standard, for example, STOMED for procedures, if I use, and it will be very, very easy. Only the value or the cost in front of those lists will keep changing depending upon the payer I am empaneled with. So I explained you, we will not touch, or the payer will not be required to touch discharge summary until unless there is a trigger. There is a trigger that was notified that there might be a fraudulent. So the normal claims will pass through easily through the machine or the rule engine. But there will be some cases which will get filtered, and divided into two buckets. One, which needs more information, and the payer might request for more information, and maybe they might have missed adding some information for the calculation. The provider updates the information, sends it back. The other category will be medical audit category, where they see there is something fishy. They have to physically check it. So they keep it in the separate, but that is only 10% of the claim. Right now, what is happening in PMJs, which should also stay just in between us. Every case, they do a post claim payment audit. So they do and when they retrospect, whenever they find a fraud, for everything they do a medical audit. Medical audit is very, very costly, because there are resources that are hired, specific resources that are hired to actually go on the ground and go to that hospital and do a check. It should be the other way around. It should be 90% 10 to 9, 10 is to 90. But right now it's more 90%. All the fraud cases are going into medical audits. So just to avoid that, for medical audits, what will I need? I might need a discharge summary to go through. I might also need many reports. So what NHA has also very clearly mentioned, the discharge summary will be a clinical document that should be part of the PHR framework. PHR is nothing but personal health record. PHR framework. And the claim that I'm submitting, the claim will have all the minimum required information. It also had the clinical information I need as a payer to approve or reject a claim. Hospital will only give a pointer saying, for example, discharge summary had an ID. I will just give the discharge summary ID in the claim document that I'm submitting, or the claim request I'm submitting. When there is more information required or more check to be done, depending upon the type of case, only then I use that pointer with consent to access that discharge summary, which will still reside in the PHR or the source system or the HIS where it was created. So I only give the pointer. Today, now when we actually implement it, maybe 10 months down the line, the pointer will not be there, because right now we don't even have PHRs in place. But it will be a scanned copy, but slowly these scanned copies will go away and only pointers will remain. The more e-objects, payers e-object and providers e-objects start getting used, these scanned copies will go away. But it will take some time. It will definitely take some time. This is a major change. At least some claim information, some clinical data I have to run analysis on, to train my rule engine to do a better fraud management. So this is how these two are separate. I will only access the personal health record when I need more information for a claim using the discharge summary ID. Yeah. This is just an overview of what a discharge summary would look like. Again, it will have all the detail that happened to patient during a hospitalization. Any doubts till now? So गए सब लोग?
नहीं मैम.
Okay, so अभी हमने ये objects पढ़ लिया. I know you guys already know the advantages and disadvantages, but I'll just read out these. Operational advantages. Till now we had paper forms. We couldn't analyze data. We couldn't do any. It was basically a dump of information. I have to read through every single sentence, every single form to arrive at a conclusion. Now with e-objects, we'll have structured, coded, machine readable data, which is very clear to all of us. Fast and cost-effective claim processing. Right now, why the delay in claim processing? Because it has to go through manual process. It has to first go through the admin person who reads it carefully, passes, fails it, asks for more information if required. Then it goes to the clinical team, which again reads the clinical part of it, reads through all the reports, reads through all the discharge summary. So that process will be reduced because we will have all the data in digital format, and I can just put a rule engine, a clinical and admin rules, and build a clinical and admin rules that will actually pass or fail a claim. Only 10% of the claims or 20% of the claims would require physical reading or manual reading. Okay, sorry, 2 minutes. Yeah. Same common structure and meaning across the health insurance industry. I have already given an example of MDDS. We are using MDDS. MDDS actually defines you what is the element, what kind of information are you capturing in that element, and what is the format. So it becomes English for everyone. Nobody is writing in different formats. Nobody is submitting information in different labels also. So again, common structure and meaning across the health insurance industry. Freedom to choose applications for claim submission. Now, because I have already given the specifications in public domain, there will be so many options available to providers as well as payers that I can use any application that is capable of generating these e-objects. I am not stuck with one provider because all these are based on standards, and any application that can actually implement standard should be capable of generating these e-objects. And last which I have been repeating since the beginning, minimum required information to process a claim without looking at the attachment. That is what I am trying to do. I am giving you all the information you need as a payer for your rule engine or your claim processing system to approve or reject a claim. Technology wise, it is an interoperable system which is based on FHIR resource 4, which is again recommended in NDHB, which is an interoperability standard, a container object, which actually tells you, it goes to a detail where each container, for example, patient resources one container, which will carry all the information about patient. Basically, his demographics, his telephonic details, his communication details. But the FHIR doesn't end there. It goes further, and within the patient resource, they have very, very specifically defined where the telephone ID which field should carry the telephone number, which field should carry my email address, which field should carry my age, my gender. So it has gone to that level of interoperability. Very, very refined. Again, metadata standards are used, basically common semantic across the industry. Open API specification for the industry so that they can innovate, like challenges like claims resubmissions, payment reconciliations. Now, because we have open standard, we have open form, they can build the innovation. They can just use this basic as a starting point and build innovations on top of it to improve the claim life cycle. Highly secure encrypted health claim information. Lightweight, it is a lightweight JSON based container that support syntactic and semantic interoperability. By now you understand semantic and syntactic. Semantic is same meaning, common meaning. Syntactic is structural. So these e-objects are nothing but also give you a structure to how you submit your claim information, which remains standard across the industry. Again, machine readable data, you actually will not need manual interventions. You will just need a rule engine in place to do that for you. So the advantage, again, from a provider perspective, providers basically, especially in public health or public health schemes, the major issue providers have is they never get payment. The payments are delayed up from 2 months, from 2 weeks up to 12 months. It just gets stuck. So once we have everything visible, there is a transparency. If you see the first time when the pre-authorization are submitted and approved, a claim ID gets generated. That will remain constant for that entire claim life cycle until the payment is made to the provider. So you have visibility. Where is your claim lying? Where is it getting stuck? What is it missing? And also it is machine readable, and machines have to pass it. It will be very, very fast. The turnaround term will be very, very fast. State health perspective, because we also have minimum clinical data being collected here. We also have expense data, because for them, for a state health department or a for the center, it's a cost for them. Funding these health insurance is also a cost. So they would want to see which is the package which is consumed more and in which geographical area. You will also be able to see what is the disease burden of a particular geographical area depending upon the diagnosis and the type of claim that are coming from that area. And they can actually do a trend analysis there. Why only this particular area having all these C sections? Are those C-section required, or they were just, and why normal delivery rate is low there? Then they actually do an investigation, drill down investigation on the basis of the trend they get. Insurance perspective, again, they will have data in machine readable format. They'll be able to better manage their policies and claim payments. And their cost of processing a claim will reduce considerably. Patient's perspective, again, patient will have more options now. They can go to any empaneled hospital. They can get multiple second opinions, specialist options, and they have a freedom to choose from the number of hospitals available in their geographical area. And slowly, if the more these data gets captured, the more e-objects are generated, they will actually be able to have a PHR in place, which might be required to make decisions in emergency situations like accidents or any other emergency situation. That's all. Thank you. Any questions?
Priyanka, I had one question. So the MBDS has the language code direction and these recognized official languages, but when it comes to actual data elements, are those also translated into each of these languages to ensure seamlessness?
Can you repeat your question, because I didn't hear you properly?
Sorry, sure. I was saying I'm aware that MBDS has recognized official languages and as per ISO standards, and there is an official code to them. But at a data element level, are all the data elements also translated into these languages, so that somebody is building a system in Tamil, then each and every data element that they use already is a part of MBDS in Tamil?
So,
Because
yeah,
right?
MDDS provides you laundry list of all the elements that you might use in a healthcare transaction. But the capability of converting into a local language is a feature that are built into the systems. So MDDS has nothing to do with it. The translation is part of the system feature. For example, Raksa is able to do it. That is a feature that they have designed.
Yeah.
Nothing.
So I think what my question is that when that's a feature, I agree, but organizations sometimes when they're doing translations like we did for CAS also, we necessarily don't use the exact translation. We might sometimes use a more locally common word instead of that which is used. So that is where the variance sometimes happens. So I was trying to understand if there is any repository for that as well, from a standardization perspective.
So there is no repository, but what implementers or developers should also do is when they are deciding and when they really want to use a local jargon or local label. So the label, the UI label you may save, but in the backend you should always follow what MDDS tells you, the type of data that particular field will capture and the size of data, and if there is a value set. Even if you're just able to do these three things, it doesn't matter what is the label that you are actually using in your application. Dr. Pankaj, am I right?
Yeah, you're right.
So, Anaita, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Is this also related? How are we going to relate it with cost of change? How are we going to connect it with cost of change? Because the entire change that we are asking for also has a lot of cost implications. So, is there a model that we are sharing with them apart from SEA? I mean, how is that getting addressed, or are we also looking at that angle, or we are just leaving at the hospitals to, to sort of address it? Is
I
the
think
government looking at it?
I think we don't have a clear answer to this, but the only thing that might work is the incentive that e-objects provide. For example, I already gave you an example how the payment gets stuck for such a long time. Then that hospitals run on credit. They normally run on credit because the payment never come across. Once you tell providers that you will get your payment in 3 days, that is a major incentive to them, and that will automatically they will be able to bear the cost of change then.
But is there a model that we have worked that if you, sort of implement it in your hospital, then this is what's going to be the cost, and so the business model becomes this. So, are we taking it to that level, or we are just leaving it till here? I know as a digital, probably we'll just leave it till here. But if
Right.
we also convert it, or if we take it forward, extend it to looking at it as a business model.
Yeah. So, for example, I would just say from a quality perspective, NHA still does. It pays 10% extra to NABH accredited hospitals. A similar model they should come up with. Okay, if you submit me payment in e-object format, I'll give you 5% or 1% on top of the claim payment. I mean, other countries also use a financial lever to make a change so that they also feel awarded there. I don't know if
Yeah.
India has thought about it, and I don't know if we are in a position to suggest that. But Dr. Pankaj, do you have any perspective on it?
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah. So what I was saying, that have we also looked at? So I was trying to connect it with the cost of change. That have we worked out on a model that if 100-bed hospital needs to change its systems, this is going to be the cost, and how this cost gets compensated either in by the by means of incentives or time period, how it gets addressed. Are we looking at developing that model so that when we are talking to the hospitals or when we are presenting the case and we are promoting it or advocating for it, then we also say that okay, you have a hospital like this, and this is going to be the cost of change and how it's going to be addressed. These are the ways of addressing it. So ultimately, coming out with the proposition saying that you actually benefit.
That's a good point, but I don't think we have all the data points to calculate that.
So my only point is that if we go a step ahead and we look at that angle, then the whole proposal becomes very comprehensive, and maybe that will be more attractive, and we find us. I mean, we are bringing out the problem, but we can also provide the solution with that. Provide, or at least bring their attention towards it. So that is my observation.
Yes, valid point. But to calculate all this, we need all the data. And as it goes in India, I'm not even sure that kind of data is available, but we could attempt it. I mean, that's a good
Because
thought.
otherwise, it might just become a theoretical thing, and we might not be able to achieve the kind of things that we are trying to achieve in a time period that. So maybe if we can identify a hospital, and we can work with the hospital to, sort of work on what kind of costs are involved and how the cost of change and who bears it, and who can bear it, and then we, we are looking at SEA. So SEA is one point, but that's only hand-holding that we're talking about. But we are not talking about the implementation cost.
No, I understand what you're saying. So the cost of change is a very important thing. So even in this one, what we are saying is that we are accelerating the turnaround time of the payments. We're not getting them extra payments. So the
Yeah, so
only
that's what I'm
thing,
saying. It's a benefit. That's a benefit. So how we can show it's not necessary
so
that every benefit can be shown in terms of finances, but in terms of the benefits that they are able to get through
so this is a clear
implementing.
benefit. So this is a
Yeah.
clear benefit. I thought you were
Yeah.
talking about in terms of finances.
No. Of
Because
course, finance also. So this
so
is
if it,
also,
in
if you
terms of
convert this,
finance, no, in terms of finance, Aprajita, then it is only the interest that on their working capital, right? So they're getting more working capital in hand, and the interest on that money that they are losing or they were losing is
uh,
something they are gaining, right?
uh, uh,
So
and all,
that's all it is. So
uh,
which is actually
no,
from
is
a
that all it is? Is that all it is? Because people will have to change a lot of systems, in their own in the infrastructure changes, or
no. So
all that is a
no, no.
cost.
No, Prajita. The point from a financial perspective, the point is that the cost of change for will be pretty large. But in terms of
Under various
financial returns
components.
under various components, but
Uh,
in terms of returns on that
of course,
capital
of course,
is going to be
usual.
more availability of cash in hand or working capital as it's called. Now, how do
So
you
so
attach a value to working capital?
So, for example, like I keep hearing the Max,
Uh-huh.
the Max case. So,
Uh-huh.
can we not draw out of that Max case, and also, maybe
Oh,
with, or maybe through, by the some of our existing partner in the hospital segment, if we can have some partner and we can work out a cost
no, no, no.
model.
So
I
Max
don't
case
know. I
was
mean,
very different. Max case was very different.
okay.
The contract was drafted like that we will be paid X amount, and then Y amount on so much of savings, and Z amount on so much more savings, and then X raised to the power
Yeah,
N
it could
based
be. It
on
could be.
business. So that the contract was drafted very differently. But
So my observation, I don't know whether it is right or wrong, but my observation has been completely from the point of view that we are talking about cost of change a lot now, and how we can actually show the cost of change, and how we can show the benefit and analyze it, and if we can bring that to the table, otherwise
yeah,
it's fine.
since you mentioned Max, the um, a lot of people sort of considered Pero Systems as a IT services vendor, but that was not the case because of the nature of the contract. I always said that it's a partnership deal for a very long term, because unless the hospital makes money, actually the icing on the cake and the margins, the profit margins, is something Pero doesn't get. So it was only the basic cost that was being given. The rest of it was going to come only if the hospital made money.
So
or
that
saved
journey,
money.
that when we'll be able to achieve that the hospital gets the money. Till
Yeah,
that point, the whole journey has to be shown in terms of
exactly. But
yeah.
but the problem with the market is none of the IT services vendors are willing to take that risk. Nobody is willing to sign a contract like that. And neither are hospitals willing to wait and let the IT services vendor be sort of nagging them forever. So,
But even if we have the case ready with us, at least
so this was a contract that was done the way these contracts are done in the US. In India, nobody does contracts like that.
I know. So I'm sorry if I've sounded completely.
No, you're right.
Know.
No, your question is absolutely right. But the challenge is in the answer to that question.
Okay. So through this SEA, we are only trying to provide them the design, right? And we are trying to provide them the handholding support, right? In change of system, whatever cost gets involved in that, has to be paid by the hospital, right?
Yeah, for a project, 80% of the cost is usually design,
Ha, ha, ha,
and we are absorbing that cost.
ha, ha. So this kind of, of narrative building on the finances that, this is a cost out of which this cost gets absorbed by, by SEA or whoever. And this is the only cost which you are going to incur, which gets, back to you in so much time, like this. If we
But
have
then
this
there is a
narrative-
challenge. But there's also a challenge in my argument, and that
Yeah.
is IT services companies and typical fly-by-night operators as they are existing in India.
Uh,
They do not do design investment at all. They do everything at the cost of the customer.
So the government cannot give you the, construct the model like NDHP is a guideline, right? Is a guideline to making a design.
Mhm.
So can NHA or can the government not put it as their contribution towards the whole domain and space?
Yeah, they
Towards
can.
this transformation.
They
So is that
definitely
not
can.
something? So is that not something that we can probably bring it to the government and provide them the cost benefit? How they'll be benefited, how the whole health system will be benefited if they invested this much, and that will be the government because government right now is only giving a blueprint. Apart from that, everything else is expected from the hospitals. Of course, the larger chunk is the government hospitals, but from the private hospitals to get motivated and to get incentivized is something that the government can give this kind of if they can contribute, then probably the pace of implementation can become faster in the private sector with the private sector.
So
I don't
you're
know.
going back to the financial lever that we always talk
Yes,
about.
yes.
So yeah, so globally, financial lever is what has worked from the government or from whoever the large entity running the standards is. Usually the government, of course. So in the US, it has been tax incentives. In Canada, it has been other kinds of incentives, because in Canada, there is government owns the provider and the payer both. In UK also it is the same. In Australia, it's a mixed model. So there they have an incentive program. So the incentive
so
is that
Priyanka was mentioning in the beginning that the government probably 80% of the whole population will get covered, but probably government will provide it in terms of tax or in terms of contribution towards the policy policy money that will be done. So probably all those things, yeah. Maybe
so that's what we've been waiting for,
yeah.
right? So we
Maybe
are
in 2
waiting.
years' time, we'll see the whole health system being becoming a central subject. We don't know.
Yeah, so that's anyway happening. India is moving from a provider-centric to a payer-centric model. And when the payer-centric model happens and the size and scale of Ayushman Bharat grows, so it's not just Ayushman Bharat, it is Ayushman Bharat plus plus. So, all the government schemes, state schemes, everything put together. So when that happens, will become a pretty large financial lever. And that is why we were for the last year and a half, that's exactly what we have been doing. We said there's a financial lever, we need to sort of leverage that. And that is why we went and made those interventions that Priyanka talked about. Now we are seeing the next lever of change, which is because of the epidemic, it's the epidemiological surveillance. So that is the new lever of change. And, so now we will go after the provider market.
I was talking to one of the senior banking person very recently, and he was saying that in 2 years' time, the entire health system will be taken by the become a central subject and centrally controlled thing, and that is what probably will make the difference.
Yeah. So globally, if you look at every country, wherever there is a democratic process, healthcare is one of the top 3 vote getters. In India, it had not been until 2014. For the
But
first time,
yesterday news says that about 11 to 12 states in America uh, have still not, the kind of guidelines that is provided by the government there. They have still not adopted it, and because it's the federal government again.
Yeah, correct.
So this is very strange that even even though America is a centrally controlled has a central control on health as a subject, but still there are about 12 states which is not adhering to what the central is proposing.
Yeah, so that's
In a country like America.
So I would not like to comment on that, but
I know.
yeah,
I
so
know.
it's actually a leadership issue than anything else.
They also have a presidential form of government, which makes the government which makes the governor like a president. So they're not divergent only on health; they're divergent on many major issues like gun control.
Yeah. You're right.
Completely.
You're right. So, so it's a Pankaj, as my last this. I was just so what is it? How do you think that blueprint that the government is going to go about? How this will get implemented? Are we looking at the kind of pace that we're looking at, or how will it get implemented? If we are not, government is fine.
So it requires a lever for change. So as I mentioned, one lever for the change is the financial lever, and we've spent about a year and a half working on that. The second lever of change is the epidemiological surveillance, and it wasn't existing earlier. Although in our strategy council we did mention that, but we said it's a weak lever. But now it becomes a strong lever.
Yeah, data.
So so now we'll go after that. So that's a strong lever for change. It's woken up everybody from sleep.
Yeah, I think in that US Modi, Howdy Modi, he spoke about it and he said we are sitting on a gold mine of data, and data is the only thing. Data is going to be the new gold mine for this whole global economy, and we as a country of such a large population will be the if we have the data in place.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Okay.